Welcome to another episode of Outside the Frame. I'm David Geffner, Executive Editor of ICG Magazine, your host as we visit with the world's best camera and publicity teams. This next episode you're about to experience with Hungry Man Productions, an LA-based commercial house, and its managing partner, Caleb Dewart, was meant to be a shorter segment as part of another episode. But the conversation with Caleb was so impactful, so important to the LA-based film community that we wanted to share it with you as its own standalone episode. So let's get started. Hungry Man is a nearly 30-year-old LA-based production company specializing in commercials. In the wake of the recent wildfires in Southern California, Hungry Man has very publicly, with Instagram and LinkedIn posts, committed to, quote, fighting for every job they shoot to be in LA. Adding that if a shoot goes overseas for whatever reason, they'll return 3% of their profits to LA-based union film crew members. Joining me now is Hungry Man's managing partner, Caleb Dewart. A Boston native, Caleb began his career in music videos, producing clips for the likes of Jennifer Lopez, Gwen Stefani, Justin Timberlake, and many others. In 2008, he pivoted into the world of advertising, joining Hungry Man as a line producer. In 2016, Caleb became a hybrid producer EP for the company. In 2019, a full-time executive producer. And then in 2023, just 2 years ago, he became Hungry Man's managing partner. Hey, Caleb.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much for joining us on this podcast. Your co-founder of Hungry Man is Brian Buckley, who can't be with us here today, but he started the company in 1997 in LA. Almost 30 years ago, we're talking about. The company has gone on to win pretty much every major advertising award. You just recently took home 7 Clios for a Disney-branded spot directed by Taika Waititi and shot by our own Local 600 director of photography, Mike Berlucci. What is it about Southern California that has not only kept the company here, but warranted such a public commitment to try to shoot all your jobs here?
I mean, first of all, Brian lives here. I live here. Kim Delara, who's a fellow partner in EP, lives here. We have our biggest office. We have offices in New York, London, 2 offices in Brazil as well. But right. Our biggest office is in Los Angeles, so it's home. And but more importantly, I mean, there's a reason why it's called our industry is called Hollywood, and which is we have the best crews in the world here, and that's really, I mean, from a craft perspective, right? There's not a better place on the planet to work with the best people in the world.
Right. Yeah. Speaking at a recent rally, Brian described most of the people in the audience who were union members, crews, as, quote, his family. He talked about them as a family. Can you talk about what makes union crews unique maybe to LA? They're great crews all over the world. We know that. We're not going to disparage any crews anywhere. But what makes them special to Los Angeles, you think?
I think it starts with just the depth of, historically speaking, and this may change as our industry shifts, but the depth of experience and the depth of sort of rosters of you have, I don't even know how many crews. It's weird because it's a big business, but it's a small business, and we tend to work with the same, production designers and DPs, and there's a frequency thing, but I think it's just partially about reps. Again, historically, not put outside the last couple of years and sort of where business is shifting, but I think historically the amount of if 20 crews are all working 20 days a month, for decades, there's just a wealth of experience that comes with that is not, again, that's not happening in other parts of the world in quite the same way. Obviously things are starting to shift in a concerning way, but I think it just starts there with just, again, incredible experience.
What about the region itself? As you said, it's Hollywood, so we've had a wealth of stages, sound stages, infrastructure. It's always been based here. As we said, it's shifted a little bit in other cities. But what about the region for your purposes, for shooting commercials? I'm thinking of car commercials. I'm thinking of locations that you can use.
Yeah, certainly diversity of location. Not that I surf, but one of the things you talk about is you could surf in the morning and be skiing in the afternoon, if you live here, which is completely insane. We have obviously incredible diversity of locations, and not just like the geography and sort of environmental stuff, but also just like, all right, we're looking for, I don't even know, like there's basically everything. I mean, Wayne McClammy, who's also a partner at Hungry Man, just did an Amazon job that shot up at Santa Anita at Bluesky Ranch, and they were doubling for India.
Mm.
And it's like, looks pretty. I was like, I can't believe we shot that in Los Angeles.
We just had a film at Sundance that we talked about for the magazine that shot there for the Middle East.
Right, exactly. Yep. I mean, yeah, obviously we did there was a ton of art department that went into that, but still kind of amazing. I mean, it's just wild to me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So we all know the last 5 years have been a roller coaster ride. I mean, we've seen things in the industry we've never seen before. Global pandemic, COVID. We had a near historic peak in production about 2 years after COVID. I want to say 21, 22 with streaming. And then we had 2 strikes. And I want to know from the perspective of the commercial community, how has that curve rolled for you and where do you think you are now?
To be honest, I don't, outside of the immediate couple of months with COVID, I mean, we actually had one of our best years ever during COVID. Wow. Because no, you couldn't go to Canada, right? You had to do a 14-day quarantine to shoot anything there.
Right.
We did a little bit of work in Mexico City, but like we were doing most of our work here, which, is an interesting because like, listen, I put aside the fact that I'm a very personally very progressive person, just in terms of my politics. Mm-hmm. If you put that aside and even put aside, my interest in taking care of the crews that are here that we consider family, purely from a business perspective,
right.
Doing jobs domestically, especially in Los Angeles, is the best thing for us as a small business. Because our business model is predicated on the amount of money that flows through the company. Our markup is based on, that number. It's just a math equation. So when you talk about shooting things here, it's like, well, what does 4 days in Los Angeles cost? What does 4 days in Bulgaria cost? Or what does 4 days in Vancouver cost? And it's, there's massive money left on the table when you go shoot in Bulgaria because it's a fraction of the cost. So a fraction of our markup, which is how we make, our living. So during COVID, it benefited us that no one wanted to travel to places like Bulgaria during COVID because
right.
God knows what their protocols were. But
right.
but to get back to your question, in terms of the roller coaster, we haven't really had a roller coaster because also we haven't had a strike in commercials.
Right.
I mean, honestly, in my time in commercials, there was a SAG strike a long time ago, which probably precipitated some of the shift to offshore production, especially going to Canada.
90s, was that
yeah, late 90s. I think that was the last one, unless my memory's fuzzy. Like, I don't think we've had a team. I may be wrong on this, but I don't think we've had a Teamster or IA or DGA strike, just because, it's a different dynamic. I think the thing that crew, I'm not entirely sure crew understands the sort of dynamic that exists with production companies and advertising agencies. It's like where we are in the ecosystem.
Yeah. Talk about that. I mean, we'd like to hear a little bit more about
that. I think it's an interesting thing because I know we're just the middleman for this process.
Right.
Like, I think we are not the studio. We are an intermediary who is facilitating, work for clients and agencies. So like when a client says like, hey, we got to shoot this non-SAG, and so we're not signatory because we're not an agency or a client,
right.
And they say we want to shoot, non-union on the SAG side. We're powerless in that process other than just saying no to the opportunity to produce the work.
Turn down the work.
Yeah, which is like, that's a tough thing. Obviously, we do have directors that won't shoot non-SAG with non-SAG talent. But for the most part, we're like, we're in the business of yes. I say it all the time. We're in the business of yes, and yet we get punished for it all the time in various ways. But again, we're the sort of middleman. So like, hey, this thing has to shoot offshore. We get that mandate, 100% of the time.
Wow.
From like when that decision is made, it's either made before we're even engaged in the process by a cost controller, most likely, and a client who set a budget range, and especially to avoid, they want to go offshore mostly to avoid using SAG talent because obviously, the costs are, significantly higher to use SAG talent than non-union. But that's a decision that's made,
way before you're
before we're ever involved in the process.
Right.
And then again, we're either saying yes to that opportunity, or we're turning it down. And in some cases, we do have directors like Hank, who is one of the founders of Hungry Man, just is not interested in shooting, non-union in Toronto.
Good for him.
Good for him, but he's also
good for us.
Yeah, good for everybody, except he's in a different position in terms of in his life, and he can be picky in a way that our younger directors who are frankly have children and a mortgage and want to continue to work and want to incrementally build their reels, and hey, okay, what can I do to make this as good as it can be?
Right.
But again, I think it's an interesting thing to me to just take a step back and realize that crews, I don't think totally understand that part of it, that we're not the ones making this decision as production companies. Like, if it was up to me, we would shoot 100% of our work here because A, the crews are the best, B, we're taking care of our families. It'll be the best possible product.
Right.
And financially, all the reasons. But again, it's not up to us.
Well, I mean, you've already made a pretty vocal statement by coming out about returning profits. That's one reason why we have you in the studio today talking. Let's get back to kind of the original impetus for that was the wildfires a couple of months ago here in Los Angeles. How are you, Brian? How was your company impacted directly? Because pretty much everyone in this community, everyone knows someone who probably lost their house or was displaced. How are you guys impacted directly?
I mean, we did have a shoot that was stopped because of the fires. I mean, we're shooting at Paramount Studios, but the air quality was not great. There were concerns about just that part of it, and also the optics. I think that's where ultimately the clients made a decision. I'm just like, this is probably not. And again, that was another example where I think crews didn't quite understand. We're like, we're the production company. We can't tell our clients that we have to pull the plug unless someone tells us we have to. And it just took a lot of conversations. But I think crews were a little upset with us for not just like, all right, we're just canceling. It's like, it's not our money.
Right.
Like, that's a huge, we were shooting with a celebrity and it was a challenging thing. But obviously the clients ended up, I think, making the right decision.
Right.
But again, it was a process. So I think that was the only really, I think the crazy thing about Los Angeles is like the size of this city. The truth is, it's like, I still haven't been to the Palisades.
Right.
I go to Pasadena all the time. I live in Glendale. I'm close to it. But it's like, it's a wild thing that this massive event happened, and yet somehow I'm not like impacted outside of traffic, which is like, if we're talking the scheme of.
You didn't have to evacuate where you were.
No, we were on a like on the zone. And I actually, the morning of the start of the fire in Altadena, because that is the one I'm closest to, I drove up the 210. I was like, my wife was concerned.
Yeah.
And I was like, should we be worried? And I was like, this thing's going to would have to go a long, long way. Because it is, as the crow flies, you're like, this would be biblical for it to get to Glendale. But the evacuations, I think, were mostly smoke related, which, was a thing. But again, that's all trivial. I mean, in the scheme of things, no one in sort of our immediate, no one working at Hungry Man, like staff, lost their homes. You mentioned Mike Berlucci at the top of this. He lost his home.
He did. Yeah.
An amazing production designer we work with all the time, Zach Matthews, literally texted me a photograph. The fire, the Eaton Canyons fire, started across the street from his house. Somehow he did not lose his home, which is insane.
Wow.
I mean, everything around him is lost, but for whatever reason, his house was spared, which I think is one of those, like, I'm not sure what I would hope for more of, just like, I'd almost rather, again, I feel very fortunate that I did not lose my home, but I do wonder if it's like, it's almost more of a hassle, and a nightmare to
be on a block.
To be on a block where you're just like, all right, this is what I'm surrounded by for the next decade or however long it's going to take to rebuild.
The randomness of it is crazy. Did Hungry Man get involved with any direct efforts? I know, for example, many of the IATSE unions, the craft unions, came together and did give outs, and the costume designers were involved and the grips were involved. Did you guys get involved with any of those kind of direct LA
we did. We
efforts?
did. Brian was personally super involved with a clothing drive thing. We did our biggest contributions outside of the 3% we're giving to the various union folks now, which is an ongoing thing, was doing GoFundMe contributions for the folks that we knew. Location Scout that we work with all the time, Mike Berlucci, a handful of others who we sort of were part of our immediate family. That was really the sort of core focus. And Brian very quickly kind of came up with the film, the recovery thing, and that became our focus. Just because it's, to be honest, not an insignificant sum of money to.
Yeah. Can I ask
to
you
be,
directly about how that, do you already have a path for how that will be dispersed as far as union members, our members, union members directly benefiting?
we're still working on the exact. We're basically have put it into like an escrow account because it's again, we're shooting a job in Mexico City this week
Right.
or next week. We just shot in Vancouver. We're bidding more jobs for Vancouver. We're shooting in Spain right now. So
And again, and we should say what you said earlier, this is at the behest of the client. This is at the agency.
yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, not a voluntary thing. So Brian's sort of big picture thing was just like, we're going to tax ourselves because we are not driving these decisions, but we just feel strongly enough that this is an important thing. And it's a way of, keeping a conversation going and just pointing a sort of spotlight on the thing of like, hey, just a reminder, all this work's leaving this country. Because
Right.
I think our assessment is like, okay, we had this fire and, LA was burning, but the production community's been burning for a while. Like this is not a new thing. And this is a moment when we can, maybe get a conversation really going around why it matters to shoot here. I've been involved with trying to get filming back to America in general, but especially Los Angeles, trying to have conversations with various people about how we do that. And I think the struggle is it's just an incredibly complex, thing. I mean, I think there's like bigger picture, I think like existentially, there's a struggle for like, what's going on in the world? And there are gigantic factors in play that are impacting our lives in a negative way. But then you kind of zone in on the actual, okay, here we are in production, try and get filming back here. And I think there's just a massive struggle to figure out how you do that.
Right.
It's, because it's gigantic moving. You're talking about having real conversations with the biggest corporations in the world.
Right.
Because that's where it starts. It's not,
right.
Again, production company, we're the easy target for outrage, which I totally get and own. But at the same time, practically speaking, it's like, yeah, we're, go up the ladder a few rungs.
You're not
that's
Nike.
where,
you're not.
Yeah,
you're not
we're
GM.
not, and obviously, my sentiment, and I think it's true, is that advertising in particular and production historically has been, it's kind of the last made in America product. Like in commercials, I was just in New York for the last week or this past week, got back yesterday, and the number of agencies in New York is insane. It's like that's where sort of the IP is created here.
So that's remained. That hasn't changed.
So that hasn't changed.
Madison Avenue still exists.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of agencies are owned by holding companies that are global, like Publicis is a French company, whatever. But still, there's a ton of advertising happening here. And again, production has historically been, and these are white collar-ish jobs. Although I maintain, production is truly a blue collar, industry. Like I think it's factory work. It's actually really hard factory work. And I think
really skilled.
Yeah, and I think that there is a sort of bigger challenge of just like, if you're going to have a real conversation with America about why keeping filming here or keeping filming in Los Angeles matters, it's a hard one because I think people just go like, oh, it's George Clooney. Like anytime they roll out, we roll out celebrities to advocate for anything, it's just like, it's a struggle because I think, no one understands that, like, what does a grip really do? Like, what does an electrician really do? What does a prop person really do? This is not like fancy, white collar jobs and everyone's making insane amounts of money. It is truly like.
Truly, that's the misperception.
Yeah.
And when production slows or a thing like a wildfire, all these ancillary companies that are part of the film industry, the florists, the groundskeepers, the gardeners, all these people that support that industry also suffer along with our crews. I want to throw some numbers at you, which may be encouraging, I think, and maybe they're not known very much. A recent Variety article noted that Southern California's entertainment workforce is more than 60,000, with an industry contributing more than $115 billion to the Southern California economy. The region also still has the world's largest infrastructure as far as production space, 8 million square feet, still the biggest in the world, with 13 more planned and proposed projects in the works. That means new building, new production space in the pipeline. So my question to you and to Hungry Man is, do those numbers, should they be numbers that give us hope for where LA is going, where Southern California is going to be as we move forward the next year or two?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think that there probably needs to be, and this is obviously it's starting to happen. I think that, legislators are sort of behind, frankly. I think California, whether it was sort of like arrogance about, you know, what our industry here means globally, and just not kind of like having their sort of eye on sort of what is happening in the rest of the world. But I think, yeah, I mean, hopefully filming comes back here in a stronger way. I do think that, they're talking about, making the tax credit $750 million. Just Hungry Man's, I mean, I don't want to get specific in terms of numbers, but just Hungry Man's contribution to the economy of Southern California, because we still, because we are known for celebrity, because we are known for comedy dialogue, I do think we are outliers in our industry in terms of the amount of work we still do in Los Angeles compared to others. But our like individual contribution is kind of an insane amount of money for a company of like, I mean, do we have 10 employees? Like we're this tiny little, I mean, full-time
Yeah.
employees, right? I mean, obviously we hire, we do, I don't know, 20,000 time cards a year or some insane number of time cards a year. But again, a very small company, but we're running, the money is basically being passed through, obviously, because it's like,
Yeah.
okay, here are the costs and it's all flowing through the company. But it's a major contribution to the economy when we're talking about, crew, union crew, um, all of our vendors, and then like you said things like florists, and then throw in hotels. We do these jobs. Taika did a job for Homes.com for the Super Bowl, and there were 25 agencies and clients who all came to Los Angeles
To see the
and
spot being shot.
to see this spot being shot, and spent money on dinners and got hotel rooms and used Ubers
Hmm.
and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's not super significant in sort of, but it's like when you extrapolate that out for all the jobs we did in Los Angeles that year, it starts to add up to a
Right.
lot of money.
Right.
So,
You mentioned at the outset about kind of where you guys, Hungry Man, fit in the chain of commercial production, and that was great to hear some of that, especially maybe for our crews who are not working in commercials very often. Um, Kind of wrapping it up, would you agree with this thought that in order for a real recovery to happen, in order for the region to thrive, there needs to be kind of a we're all in this together mindset. I think on the other side, other side of genres like episodic and narrative and maybe unscripted, there is a relationship, a deep relationship with producers, with studios. Even if there's always issues with contracts and things, but
yeah.
there's a feeling like we're in this industry together, creating content. We need each other together. Does that exist in the commercial industry? And if it does, is that a way to move forward for you guys here in LA?
Yeah, I mean, I think it again, I absolutely. But again, I think the challenge for us, like I said earlier, it's like we are not the deciders on the hardest part of this, which is okay, where this thing has to shoot. And
Right.
that's where, um, and frankly, I think the in it together is a great sentiment, but like, what do you like actionable things? Like, what can we really truly be doing? Because again, this is a gigantic issue, but I think that's like, great. What do we do about it? And I think the one thing that I would encourage, union folks to think about is because one of to your point and to your question is a lot of folks, especially in commercials, people specifically are kind of have made SAG the boogeyman because again, when you go back to the strike of the 90s, and there is SAG talent is expensive compared to non-union, especially compared to non-union in Canada or Mexico
Hmm.
or Bulgaria or Prague. The talent is incredibly expensive compared to those places, and so people will point to that and go like, well, you know, they're the reason there's no work here. A lot of when I talk to IATSE members, especially, they'll say that like, well, SAG's the problem here,
Hmm.
and I'm like, you're getting it wrong. Sure, it's it's more different. The price per SAG talent is more different than comparing a grip in Toronto to a grip in Los Angeles.
Right.
Sure, it's not you know um, 10 20x different like it is with SAG talent, but at the same time, and I was having a conversation earlier with a friend of mine at SAG who I talk to all the time, and she's like, these numbers are wild, but at the same time, corporations are spending insane number of dollars on media buying.
Hmm.
So like, what are we really talking about here?
Hmm.
Like, sure, a SAG actor who's going to be the face of some, Bud Light commercial or whatever that airs for the entire football season, yeah, they're going to make, 6 figures on that commercial.
Right.
And I get why, IATSE crew and Teamsters and whoever else sort of who are in different units may go like, well, that seems crazy. But again, they're not, those SAG actors are working once or twice a year if they're lucky. Like, it's like winning the lottery.
Right.
It's a different thing than working 20 days a month as a grip or 20 days a month as a Teamster. So I would just encourage crew to take a step back and not demonize fellow union members, because I think
Absolutely.
that's a real, because I hear that all the time. I'm like, guys, you got this wrong. I understand it. I have empathy for like the decisions that get made and the why of it, which is about, corporations are always going to do what corporations are going to do, which is try to be profitable. Like, that's why they're there. That's why they exist. They're answering to stockholders and they're answering to boards of directors. I totally get it. At the same time, we have to, like, yes, to your point and to your question, we need to hold hands together and just, incrementally move things along and try to get change affected.
Yeah, and I think to your point, the fact that you pointed right at the outset to the skill level of our crew base here, the skill level of union filmmakers is, we'd like to think, still unparalleled. So that is an ace in the hole when you go back to how you make decisions about where productions shoot. Caleb, I want to thank you. I think we're out of time, but it was fun talking with you and enlightening. And I'm sorry Brian couldn't join us, but maybe on a future podcast.
Yeah, he is in London. For the record, he's in London shooting a UK job with a UK brand in the UK. So he's not shooting.
Taking work out.
He's not taking work away from out of this country. Okay. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Great, we appreciate it.
All
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on Outside the Frame. Stay tuned for another episode featuring Local 600 camera team members from Max's hit medical drama, The Pit, talking about the challenges of shooting 360 degrees on a Warner Brothers stage that one crew member described as literally walking into an ER. Until then, we'll see you all on set. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode.